The lights of Station Kepler 9 buzzed overhead as Daniel Hayes walked down the narrow corridor. His shift at the medical center had lasted 14 hours, and every muscle in his body ached. He carried his supply bag over one shoulder, the weight of it familiar after 3 years working on the station. Daniel was a field medic with the Interstellar Medical Corps. He had come to this remote trading hub to help people who lived on the edge of explored space. Every day brought new challenges. Alien species from dozens of worlds passed through the station, and many of them needed medical care they could not afford anywhere else. Tonight, Daniel just wanted to reach his small apartment and sleep. He decided to take a shortcut through the lower cargo district. Most station workers avoided that area after dark, but Daniel had walked it many times. The cargo bay was usually empty at this hour. He turned down a dimly lit corridor between 2 rows of shipping containers. The metal walls echoed with his footsteps. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the hum of the station's life support systems. Then he heard something else. A wet, struggling sound. Breathing, but wrong. Labored and weak. Daniel stopped walking. He stood still and listened. The sound came again, from somewhere behind the containers to his right. It was the kind of breathing that told him someone was dying. His exhaustion disappeared. Daniel moved toward the sound, stepping carefully over scattered debris and abandoned cargo straps. The breathing grew louder. He rounded a corner and stopped. Behind a stack of old containers, lying on the cold metal floor, was a creature unlike anything Daniel had seen in his 3 years on the station. It was enormous, easily the size of a small vehicle. The body was shaped like a great cat, like the leopards Daniel had seen in pictures from Earth. But this creature's fur was a deep blue color, almost black, and covered in spots that glowed faintly with bioluminescent light, a Varakian. Daniel recognized the species from his medical training, though he had never treated one before. Varakians came from a distant world and were known as fierce hunters. Many species feared them. Some wealthy traders kept them as guards or status symbols. This Varakian was dying. That much was clear. Multiple wounds covered its body, some fresh and some infected. Its breathing came in short, painful gasps. The spots on its fur, which should have glowed brightly, barely gave off any light at all. Next to the creature lay a heavy metal collar. The lock had been broken and the collar had been tossed aside like garbage. Daniel understood immediately what had happened. Someone had owned this Varakian, probably kept it in that collar for years. And when the creature became too sick or too weak to be useful, the owner had simply abandoned it here to die. Daniel felt anger rise in his chest. He had seen this before with other species, though never with a Varakian. The galaxy was full of people who treated living beings as property, discarding them when they were no longer convenient. He approached slowly, keeping his movements calm and steady. The Varakian's head lifted slightly, large amber eyes fixed on Daniel, tracking his approach. Those eyes held intelligence. They also held fear, and something that looked like resignation, as if the creature had already accepted death. Daniel knelt down about 6 feet away from the massive predator. He kept his hands visible and spoke in a soft voice. "Hey there. I'm a medic. I want to help you if you'll let me." The Varakian watched him. Its breathing did not change. Daniel moved a little closer, still talking in that same calm tone. He explained what he was doing as he opened his medical bag and pulled out a diagnostic scanner. "I'm going to check your vital signs. This won't hurt." He held up the scanner so the creature could see it. Then, moving very slowly, Daniel reached out and passed the device over the Varakian's body. The creature flinched but did not pull away. The scanner beeped softly, feeding information to Daniel's handheld display. The readings were bad. Severe dehydration, multiple infections, internal bleeding, malnutrition. The Varakian had been sick for weeks, maybe months. Its owner had probably stopped caring for it long before finally abandoning it. Daniel looked into those amber eyes again. "You're in rough shape, friend, but I've seen worse. I can help, but you need to trust me." He did not know if the creature understood his words, but something in its eyes changed. The fear remained, but the resignation faded just a little. Daniel got to work. He pulled out supplies from his bag and from the emergency medical station mounted on the nearby wall. First, he needed to stop the bleeding from the worst wounds. He used spray bandages that would seal the injuries and prevent infection from getting worse. The Varakian tensed when Daniel touched it, but did not try to attack. Next came fluids. The creature was dangerously dehydrated. Daniel set up an IV line, finding a vein in the Varakian's front leg. He spoke constantly as he worked, keeping his voice calm and reassuring. "This will help. You'll start feeling better soon. Just stay still for me." The night wore on. Daniel lost track of time. He cleaned wounds, administered medications, and monitored the Varakian's vital signs. The creature watched him with those intelligent eyes, and gradually Daniel saw the tension in its body ease slightly. As the first treatment took effect, Daniel noticed something strange. The patterns on the Varakian's fur were not random. The spots formed shapes and symbols that looked deliberate. Some of the glowing marks seemed to connect to each other in complex designs. Daniel had studied dozens of alien species, but he had never heard of Varakians having markings like these. By the time dawn light began filtering through the cargo bay's high windows, the Varakian was breathing more easily. The immediate crisis had passed, but the creature was far from healthy. It needed ongoing care, proper nutrition, and time to heal. Daniel sat back and rubbed his tired eyes. He looked at the massive creature before him and faced the reality of what he had just done. Station regulations were clear about abandoned exotic animals. If security found the Varakian, they would have it euthanized. The station could not afford to care for large predators, especially ones without owners. He could report the creature and walk away. His duty as a medic was to provide emergency care, which he had done. No one would blame him for leaving now. Daniel looked into those amber eyes again. The Varakian gazed back at him with something that looked like hope. "All right," Daniel said quietly. "Here's what we're going to do. My apartment isn't far. It's small, but you'll fit. Barely. We need to get you there before the day shift starts and this place fills with workers." He had no idea how he was going to move a creature this size. He had no idea how he would hide it in his apartment. He definitely had no idea how he would afford to feed it or explain his sudden need for massive quantities of medical supplies. But Daniel knew he could not leave the Varakian here to die. He had become a medic because he believed every life had value. That belief did not change based on species or circumstance. It took 2 hours to get the Varakian to his apartment. Daniel used a cargo loader he borrowed without permission and a route through maintenance tunnels that few people traveled. The creature was weak, but helped as much as it could, understanding somehow that they needed to stay hidden. When they finally reached Daniel's small living space and he managed to get the Varakian inside, he sealed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. The creature lay on the floor, taking up most of the available space. It looked around the apartment with what Daniel could have sworn was curiosity. Then those amber eyes fixed on him again, and the Varakian made a soft sound, almost like a purr. Daniel smiled despite his exhaustion. "Welcome home, I guess. We'll figure this out. One day at a time." He had no idea that this decision, made in a dark cargo bay in a moment of compassion, would change not just his life, but the fate of everyone on the station. He did not know that the creature he had saved was far more than it appeared to be. He only knew that he had done the right thing, and sometimes that was enough. The first week was the hardest. Daniel quickly learned that hiding a creature the size of a small vehicle in a station apartment required careful planning and constant vigilance. He rearranged his furniture to make space, pushing his bed against one wall and stacking his belongings in corners. Even then, the Varakian filled most of the room. Daniel decided to call the creature Nova, after the way its bioluminescent spots flickered like distant stars when it seemed to be feeling better. The name felt right somehow. When he said it the first time, Nova's eyes focused on him with what looked like approval. Every morning, Daniel went to his shift at the medical center. He acted as normal as possible, treating patients and filing reports. But his mind was always partly back in his apartment, wondering if Nova was all right, if anyone had heard sounds from his quarters, if station security would come knocking. Every evening, he returned home with supplies hidden in his bag. Medical equipment was easy to smuggle since he worked at the health center. Food was harder. Phyrekians needed meat and lots of it. Daniel used his entire food allowance and then some, claiming he had taken up intense exercise and needed extra protein. The quartermaster gave him odd looks but approved the requests. Nova improved slowly. The infections cleared up under Daniel's treatment. The wounds began to heal. The creature started eating regularly, though Daniel had to cut the meat into smaller pieces since Nova was still too weak to tear it properly. After the first few days, Nova could stand and move around the small apartment, though it mostly chose to rest. What surprised Daniel most was Nova's intelligence. The creature clearly understood human speech. When Daniel spoke, Nova's ears would perk up and those amber eyes would focus intently on his face. Nova could follow simple instructions like lie down or stay quiet without any training. More than that, Nova seemed to understand the need for secrecy. The creature never made loud sounds when other people might hear. When Daniel had visitors at his door, which was rare, Nova would move to the far corner and stay absolutely still until they left. Daniel's friend Lisa Grant noticed the change in his behavior first. She was a xenobiologist who worked in the station's research department. She and Daniel often shared meals in the cafeteria, discussing their work and complaining about station life. But during the second week after Daniel found Nova, he started making excuses to skip these meals. Lisa cornered him one evening as he was leaving the medical center. She was a short woman with dark hair and sharp eyes that missed very little. "You're avoiding me," she said without preamble. Daniel tried to look innocent. "I'm not avoiding you. I've just been tired. You're lying." "You're terrible at lying, Daniel. What's going on?" He hesitated. Part of him wanted to tell Lisa everything. She was his closest friend on the station, and keeping this secret alone was exhausting. But telling anyone meant putting Nova at risk. "It's nothing," he said finally. "Just working extra hours." Lisa studied his face for a long moment. "Fine. But when you're ready to tell me what's really going on, I'll be here." She walked away, leaving Daniel feeling guilty. He hated lying to his friend, but what choice did he have? The bond between Daniel and Nova grew stronger each day. Daniel found himself talking to the creature, explaining his day, sharing his thoughts. It felt silly at first, talking to an alien predator as if it were a friend. But Nova listened with such focused attention that Daniel soon forgot to feel foolish. He told Nova about growing up on Earth, about deciding to become a medic, about coming to this remote station because he wanted to help people who had nowhere else to go. Nova's spots would glow softly as Daniel talked, pulsing in patterns that seemed almost like a response. During the third week, Daniel started noticing the strange patterns on Nova's fur more clearly. As the creature healed and regained strength, the bioluminescent spots grew brighter. The symbols they formed became more distinct. Daniel found himself studying them during his evening treatments, tracing the lines with his eyes. They were not random markings. They formed intricate designs that connected across Nova's entire body. Some looked like mathematical equations. Others resembled star maps. Still others were completely abstract but somehow purposeful. Daniel had studied xenobiology as part of his medical training, but he had never seen anything like this. One evening, he pulled up his computer and searched the station's database for information on Virakians. The entry was brief. Virakians were a long-lived species from a distant world. They were intelligent but non-technological, living in tribal groups. Some had been captured and sold as exotic animals or guards. The species was considered dangerous but not legally protected. Nothing in the database mentioned unusual markings or patterns on their fur. Daniel looked at Nova, who was watching him from across the small room. "What are you?" he asked quietly. Nova's eyes seemed to shine a little brighter in response, but of course the creature could not answer. By the fourth week, Nova was moving easily around the apartment. The creature's strength had returned, and its bioluminescent spots glowed with steady light. Daniel no longer worried that Nova would die from the injuries and illness. Instead, he started worrying about what would happen next. He could not keep Nova hidden forever. Eventually, someone would discover them. Station security would take Nova away, and Daniel would probably lose his job for violating station regulations. He needed a plan, but every option he considered seemed impossible. Nova seemed to sense Daniel's worry. The creature stayed close to him in the evenings. sometimes resting its massive head near Daniel's chair as he worked on his computer. The gesture reminded Daniel of the dogs he had known as a child on Earth. Despite Nova's size and alien nature, there was something comforting about the creature's presence. One evening during the 5th week, Daniel was treating a minor scratch on Nova's shoulder when station alarms suddenly blared throughout the apartment. The harsh sound made both Daniel and Nova jump. A mechanical voice echoed from the wall speakers. "Attention all station personnel. Unidentified vessel approaching Kepler 9. All security teams report to stations." This is not a drill. Daniel's heart began to pound. Unidentified vessels usually meant trouble. Pirates, raiders, or hostile forces looking to steal from the station's warehouses. He moved to his computer and pulled up the station's emergency broadcast. A new message appeared. Daniel read it and felt his blood turn cold. A Krellian warship had entered the sector. The Krellians were demanding the station surrender its medical supplies and technology, or they would attack. The station's defenders were being mobilized, but everyone knew Kepler 9's security forces were small. They handled internal problems, not military threats. Another announcement followed. Evacuation protocols had been activated. All personnel should proceed to emergency evacuation pods in an orderly manner. Priority would be given to essential personnel and families with children. Daniel looked at Nova. The creature was standing now, its body tense. The bioluminescent spots were pulsing rapidly, responding to Nova's stress. Daniel's mind raced through his options. He could go to an evacuation pod. As medical personnel, he would likely get a spot. But the pods were small, designed for humans and similar-sized species. Nova could never fit. Even if he wanted to report Nova now and get help moving the creature, there was no time. The evacuation pods could only hold so many beings. A large Varakian would take up the space of several people. Station authorities would never allow it during an emergency evacuation. If Daniel evacuated, he would have to leave Nova behind. He thought about the creature dying alone in his apartment while the station was destroyed or boarded by Krellian soldiers. He thought about Nova's eyes when he had first found the Varakian in that cargo bay, full of resignation and acceptance of death. Daniel made his decision. He sat down in his chair and looked at Nova. "I'm not leaving you. Whatever happens, we face it together." Nova moved closer. The creature made a sound, not quite a purr, but something gentler than a growl. One massive paw reached out and gently touched Daniel's leg. The gesture was so careful, so deliberate, that Daniel felt his eyes water. The station alarms continued to blare. Somewhere in the corridors outside, Daniel could hear people running, shouting, panicking. The evacuation was underway. Most of the station's population would escape, but Daniel knew not everyone would make it to the pods in time. He pulled up the station's sensor feed on his computer, watching the Krellian warship grow closer. The vessel was massive, bristling with weapons. Kepler 9's small defense fleet was moving to intercept, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Daniel estimated they had maybe 30 minutes before the Krellians reached the station. Nova moved to the center of the small apartment. The creature's bioluminescent spots began to glow brighter than Daniel had ever seen them. The symbols and patterns on Nova's fur started to pulse with rhythmic light, all of them moving in synchronization. The air around Nova began to shimmer like heat rising from sun-baked pavement. Daniel watched in confusion. "Nova, what's happening?" The creature's amber eyes turned to him, and suddenly they were glowing too, shining with golden light that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. When Nova made a sound, it was different from anything Daniel had heard before. It was not a growl or a purr. It was something that vibrated in Daniel's chest, a note that seemed to bypass H. The images came faster now, overwhelming Daniel's senses. He gripped the arms of his chair as his mind struggled to process what Nova was showing him. These were not just pictures. They were memories, experiences, entire lifetimes compressed into moments. He saw Nova as it had been centuries ago, walking on a world that glowed with strange light. Other beings moved alongside Nova, creatures of different shapes and sizes, but all sharing that same inner radiance. They were called keepers. Nova's thoughts whispered in Daniel's mind. Guardians of balance, protectors of the spaces between chaos and order. The keepers did not rule or conquer. They watched and waited, and when the universe tilted too far toward destruction or stagnation, they acted. They could manipulate the fundamental forces that held reality together. They could reshape matter and energy with focused will. They existed partly in the physical realm and partly somewhere else, somewhere human language had no words to describe. Daniel saw the keepers scattered across the galaxy, each one maintaining balance in their own way. They prevented wars that would destroy entire species. They guided civilizations away from paths that led to extinction. They were not gods, but they were as close to divine as mortal beings could understand. Then the images darkened. Daniel saw keepers being hunted. Species that had discovered their existence wanted that power for themselves. Slavers captured keepers, trying to use their abilities as weapons. Scientists dissected them, trying to unlock their secrets. One by one, the keepers fell. They did not fight back because fighting would create the very imbalance they existed to prevent. Nova showed Daniel the day it had been captured. A slaver ship had used technology stolen from a long-dead civilization, technology designed specifically to trap beings like the keepers. The collar they placed around Nova's neck did not just restrain. It severed Nova's connection to the deeper forces it could normally access. It trapped Nova in a purely physical form, making it just another exotic animal. For decades, Nova had been sold and resold. Owners who wanted a dangerous pet, traders who thought a Varakian would make an impressive guard. Each owner eventually grew tired of Nova or found the creature too expensive to maintain. The collar kept Nova's true nature hidden, even from itself. The keeper powers lay dormant, unreachable. The last owner had been a merchant named Krell. He kept Nova for 5 years, using the creature to intimidate business rivals. But Nova grew sick, weakened by the collar and years of captivity. Krell saw no value in a sick animal. One night he removed the collar, damaged from years of wear, and abandoned Nova in that cargo bay to die. Daniel felt the creature's resignation in those final hours. Nova had accepted death, believed it was finally over. Then a human medic heard labored breathing in the dark. A human who could have walked away but chose to stay. A human who offered help with no expectation of reward or recognition. Daniel's kindness had done something the collar never accounted for. It created a bond, a connection between human and keeper that transcended species and understanding. That connection became a bridge. Through it, Nova found a path back to the powers the collar had locked away. The physical collar was already broken. Daniel's compassion broke the deeper chains. The images faded. Daniel found himself back in his small apartment, breathing hard. Nova stood before him, no longer just a large alien creature but something magnificent and terrible. The symbols on its fur blazed with light, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. "You're a keeper," Daniel whispered. His voice shook. "You're one of the guardians." Nova's thoughts touched his mind again, gentler this time. "Yes. And you saved me when I had given up hope. You gave me purpose again. Now I will give you and your people protection." "The Krellians," Daniel said. He looked toward the wall as if he could see through the station's hull to the warship approaching outside. "You're going to fight them. I am going to protect those who deserve protection. The Krellians seek to harm innocents. I will not allow this." Nova moved toward the sealed door of the apartment. The creature's form seemed to shift, becoming less solid. The metal door, which should have blocked Nova's path, offered no resistance. The keeper passed through it like mist passing through a screen. "Wait!" Daniel jumped from his chair. "You're still recovering. You're not strong enough for this." Nova's thoughts reached back to him even as the creature disappeared into the corridor. "I am strong enough to do what must be done. Stay here. Stay safe." Daniel stood alone in his apartment. The station alarm still blared. The walls hummed with the sound of people running, shouting, trying to evacuate. He could stay here like Nova asked. He could hide and hope the creature succeeded. But Daniel had not become a medic by staying safe while others faced danger. He grabbed his medical bag and ran after Nova. The corridors were chaos. People pushed past him, heading for evacuation pods. Some carried children, others clutched whatever belongings they could grab. Station security tried to maintain order, but fear made people desperate. Daniel fought against the crowd following the path Nova had taken, He did not know how he knew which way to go, but something pulled him forward. The bond Nova had mentioned perhaps, or just instinct. He found himself at the observation deck. This area was normally restricted to station command staff, but in the chaos of evacuation, no one stopped him from entering. The massive windows looked out into space, offering a clear view of the approaching Krellian warship. Commander Gregory Pierce stood at the center of the deck, surrounded by security officers and technicians. He was a tall man with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had served in real military forces before retiring to this remote station. His face was grim as he watched the Krellian vessel draw closer. "Evacuation status?" Pierce demanded. One of the technicians checked her console. 60% evacuated. We need at least another 20 minutes to get everyone to the pods. We don't have 20 minutes. Pierce's jaw tightened. The Krellians will be in firing range in 10. Daniel pushed his way to the windows. His breath caught. Between the station and the warship, something glowed against the darkness of space. At first, Daniel thought it was a star, but stars did not move like that. The light grew larger as it approached the warship. It was Nova. The Keeper floated in the vacuum, surrounded by a field of shimmering energy. In the darkness of space, Nova's bioluminescent patterns were clearly visible, forming intricate designs that extended outward like three-dimensional sacred geometry. The creature looked enormous, far larger than it should have been. Around Daniel, the command crew noticed the phenomenon. Pierce grabbed a pair of binoculars, focusing on the glowing figure. "What in the name of reason is that?" "Unknown, sir," one of the officers replied. "Our sensors are detecting massive energy readings, but they don't match any known technology." The Krellian warship was close enough now that Daniel could make out details. Weapons ports opened along its hull. Launch tubes prepared to fire missiles. The vessel was built for one purpose: destruction. Energy bolts lanced from the Krellian ship. Missiles erupted from launch tubes. The weapons streaked through space toward Nova and beyond the Keeper, toward the station itself. Daniel's hands gripped the window frame. There were still hundreds of people on the station. If those weapons hit, evacuation pods or not, everyone would die. Nova moved. The Keeper's form blurred. The symbols on its fur pulsed with blinding light, and the weapons simply stopped. Energy. Bolts and missiles froze in space as if time itself had paused around them. They hung there motionless, silent, impossible. Daniel heard gasps from the people around him. Pierce lowered his binoculars, his face pale. "That's not possible. Those weapons were traveling at near light speed." Nova gestured, a movement that seemed casual but carried immense power. The frozen weapons rotated in space, turning back toward the Krellian ship. Not all of them, Daniel noticed. Only enough to disable specific systems. The weapons streaked back the way they came and struck the warship with precision. Explosions bloomed across the Krellian vessel's hull, not the massive detonations that would destroy the ship, but carefully placed strikes that took out weapon systems, shield generators, and engine controls. In less than 30 seconds, the warship went from a deadly threat to a helpless hulk drifting in space. The observation deck was silent. Everyone stared at Nova's glowing form. Inside the Krellian ship, Captain Vex slammed his fist on the command console. Warning lights flashed across every station. His crew shouted reports, their voices panicked. "Weapons offline. Shields gone. Engines not responding," Vex snarled. He was a veteran raider who had terrorized a dozen systems. He did not accept defeat. "Ram them. If we can't shoot the station, we'll crash into it and tear it apart." His crew hesitated only a moment before obeying. They fired the maneuvering thrusters, the only system still functional. The warship began to turn, pointing its armored prow toward the station. Nova's eyes flashed gold. The Keeper grew larger, its form expanding as if it were drawing energy from the vacuum itself. The symbols on its fur became so bright they lit up the darkness for kilometers in every direction. Vex watched in horror as a sphere of golden energy formed around his shech. Daniel stood slowly, placing himself between Nova and the security team. His heart hammered in his chest, but his voice came out steady. Commander Pierce, I can explain everything. But first I need to make sure my patient is stable. Pierce studied Daniel for a long moment. The commander's hand rested on the weapon at his belt, but he did not draw it. Behind him, the security officers looked uncertain, their eyes fixed on Nova's massive form. Your patient, Pierce repeated. That creature just saved this entire station from a Krellian warship. Alone. Using abilities that shouldn't exist according to every law of physics we know. He paused. And it's been living in your apartment? For 5 weeks, Daniel admitted, since I found Nova abandoned in the lower cargo bay. One of the security officers stepped forward. Sir, regulations state that exotic animals must be reported immediately. Dr. Hayes violated protocol. I'm aware of the regulations, Lieutenant. Pierce did not take his eyes off Daniel. I'm also aware that if Dr. Hayes had followed those regulations, the creature would have been euthanized. And we would all be dead right now. He looked at Nova. Can it understand us? Nova understands human speech perfectly, Daniel said. And Nova isn't an it. The Keeper is as intelligent as you or me. More so, probably. Keeper? Pierce's eyebrows rose. You're going to need to explain that term. Daniel glanced at Nova, who gave a small nod. Over the next several minutes, Daniel explained everything. Finding Nova dying in the cargo bay, the weeks of treatment, the growing bond between them, the revelation of what Nova truly was, one of the ancient keepers, guardians who maintained balance across the galaxy. As Daniel spoke, more people gathered in the corridor. Station personnel who had witnessed Nova's defense of the station wanted to see the creature up close. Lisa Grant pushed her way through the crowd, her eyes wide with amazement. Daniel, she breathed. Is it true? Did you really hide a Varakian in your apartment for over a month? I had to, Lisa. Nova would have died otherwise. She looked at the massive creature, then back at Daniel. A slow smile spread across her face. You are insane. Absolutely insane. And I have about 10,000 questions. Commander Pierce held up a hand for silence. Everyone clear this corridor. Give Dr. Hayes space to treat his patient. We'll reconvene in the station conference room in 1 hour. He looked at Daniel. Can your patient be moved? Daniel knelt beside Nova again, running another diagnostic scan. Nova is exhausted but stable. With help, we can transport the Keeper to the conference room. The space there is larger than my apartment. Pierce nodded. Make it happen. And Dr. Hayes, thank you for not following regulations. This one time, breaking the rules saved lives. With the help of the security team and a cargo transport platform, they moved Nova to the station's main conference room. The space was designed for large meetings and had enough room for Nova to lie comfortably, while Daniel continued treatment. Word spread quickly through the station. The evacuation pods returned, bringing back personnel who had fled. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. How had the station survived? What was the glowing creature that floated in space? Was it a weapon? A new technology? The conference room filled with station leadership. Pierce sat at the head of the table. Beside him were department heads, security chiefs, and representatives from various factions that lived on Kepler 9. Daniel stood near Nova, one hand resting on the Keeper's fur. Lisa had insisted on attending as the station's senior xenobiologist. She sat across from Daniel, unable to stop staring at Nova with scientific fascination. Pierce called the meeting to order. Most of you witnessed what happened today. The Krellian warship was disabled by a being we now know as a Keeper. He gestured to Nova. This Keeper was living secretly on our station, being treated by Dr. Daniel Hayes after being abandoned to die. Murmurs spread through the room. One of the civilian representatives, a woman named Paula Scott, spoke up. Commander, with respect, what guarantee do we have that this creature won't turn its powers against us? We've seen what it can do. How do we know we're safe? Daniel started to respond, but Nova's thoughts touched his mind. Let me speak to them. They deserve to hear truth from the source, Daniel nodded. Nova wants to communicate directly. The Keeper can project thoughts and images to multiple people at once. If you're willing, Nova will explain everything. The room fell silent. After a moment, Pierce nodded. We're listening. Nova's bioluminescent spots pulsed gently. Everyone in the room suddenly felt a presence in their minds. It was not intrusive or forceful. It felt like a warm voice speaking softly, offering information rather than demanding attention. Images flowed from Nova to the assembled people. They saw what Daniel had seen, the history of the Keepers, their purpose, their decline. They felt Nova's centuries of captivity, the pain of being cut off from purpose and power. They experienced the moment Daniel found Nova in that cargo bay, saw through Nova's eyes as the human medic offered help without hesitation. The bond between Daniel and Nova became clear. It was not ownership or control. It was genuine connection between two beings who recognized something valuable in each other. Daniel had saved Nova's life without expecting anything in return. That act of pure compassion had restored more than just Nova's physical health. It had given the Keeper a reason to engage with the universe again. The images faded. Several people in the room wiped tears from their eyes. The shared experience had been profound, offering understanding that words could never achieve. Lisa spoke first, her voice thick with emotion. "You've been alone for so long, watching your kind disappear, being enslaved, thinking you were the last. I can't imagine that kind of loneliness." Nova's thoughts were gentle. "I had accepted that my time was ending. Your friend Daniel showed me I was wrong. There is still work to do, still balance to maintain. What happens now?" Pierce asked. "Will you stay on our station?" "That decision is not mine alone to make. I am bonded to Daniel Hayes. Where he goes, I will follow. What he chooses to do, I will support. The bond works both ways. I am his guardian, but he is also my anchor to the physical world. We need each other." All eyes turned to Daniel. He felt the weight of their attention and cleared his throat nervously. "I haven't thought that far ahead. I've been focused on keeping Nova alive and hidden. Now that everyone knows, I guess we need to figure out what comes next." Pierce leaned forward. "Dr. Hayes, our station exists to serve people on the frontier of explored space. We provide medical care, supplies, and support to colonies and ships that have nowhere else to turn. Your work as a field medic fits that mission perfectly." "Yes, sir. That's why I came here. What if you could do more? What if you could reach places even our fastest ships can't go? Help people in situations that would normally be impossible to resolve?" Pierce looked at Nova. "With a Keeper as your partner, you could establish a rapid response team. Go to disaster zones, plague outbreaks, war-torn regions, places where normal medical teams can't operate because it's too dangerous or too remote." Daniel blinked. The idea had never occurred to him. He looked at Nova. "Would you want to do something like that? Travel to crisis zones and help people?" Nova's amber eyes met his. "That is what Keepers have always done. We go where balance is needed most. With you, I can do this work again. Not by imposing order through force, but by supporting those who choose compassion over cruelty. Yes, Daniel Hayes, I would very much want to do this." A slow smile spread across Daniel's face. "Then I guess we have a new mission." Lisa jumped to her feet. "I'm coming with you. Someone needs to document this. Besides, you'll need a proper xenobiologist on the team. No offense, Daniel, but your knowledge of non-medical alien biology is limited." "None taken," Daniel laughed. "Welcome aboard, Lisa." Others volunteered quickly. A pilot named Jake Turner offered to fly their ship. An engineer named Carmen Lopez wanted to help maintain equipment in challenging environments. A linguist named Henry Wu thought his translation skills could prove valuable when dealing with species that didn't speak common trade languages. Pierce watched the volunteers gather around Daniel and Nova with satisfaction. "I'll speak with Interstellar Medical Corps headquarters. I think they'll be very interested in funding this initiative. A rapid response team that can reach anywhere in the galaxy would be valuable beyond measure." Over the next several days, the station buzzed with activity. News of Nova's existence and the formation of the rapid response team spread throughout the sector. Some people feared the Keeper, worried about having such a powerful being among them, but most felt grateful and curious. Daniel spent his time preparing for the mission ahead. He compiled medical supplies, created protocols for operating in hostile environments, and worked with Lisa to establish documentation procedures. Nova recovered from the exhaustion of fighting the Krellians, growing stronger each day. The Interstellar Medical Corps responded to Pierce's request with enthusiasm. They provided funding for a ship and equipment. The vessel was a modified medical transport called the Horizon, fast and well-equipped but not luxurious. It was perfect for their needs. Daniel stood in the cargo bay watching the Horizon being loaded with supplies. Lisa worked nearby, creating inventory lists and muttering about the importance of proper documentation. Nova approached silently, the way the Keeper often did. You are nervous. Daniel smiled. Is it? The mining colony appeared on their view screen like a small cluster of lights against the dark surface of an asteroid. 300 people lived here, extracting rare minerals from the rock while trying to survive in one of the harshest environments humans had ever settled. Daniel studied the medical reports that the colony had transmitted. The illness had started 3 weeks ago with a single miner. Now over half the population showed symptoms: fever, respiratory distress, organ failure. 20 people had already died. The colony's small medical facility was overwhelmed. How long until we dock? Daniel asked. Jake checked his instruments. 15 minutes. The colony manager is clearing a bay for us now. Daniel turned to his team. Lisa, I need you to take samples from patients and the environment. We need to identify what we're dealing with. Carmen, work with their engineers to check air filtration systems. Henry, talk to the colonists and find out who got sick first and how the illness spread. Everyone nodded. They had drilled these procedures during the 3-day journey. Nova stood quietly nearby, watching Daniel work with approval in those amber eyes. The horizon docked smoothly. A thin man in a colony uniform waited in the airlock. His face was haggard with exhaustion and worry. Dr. Hayes, I'm Peter Kim, colony manager. Thank you for coming so quickly. We didn't think anyone would reach us in time. Daniel shook his hand. We're here to help. Take me to your medical facility first. As they walked through the colony's tunnels, Daniel saw fear on every face they passed. People watched the medical team with desperate hope. Some noticed Nova and backed away nervously, but most were too concerned with their own survival to worry about an alien predator. The medical facility was a nightmare. Every bed was full. Patients lay on the floor in the corridors. The air smelled of sickness and disinfectant. 2 exhausted medical technicians tried to provide care, but they were clearly losing the battle. Daniel immediately began organizing. He set up treatment stations, prioritized patients based on severity, and distributed supplies. Lisa took samples with practiced efficiency. Nova moved among the patients, and Daniel noticed something interesting. When the keeper approached someone, their breathing seemed to ease. Pain lines on faces relaxed slightly. Nova, are you doing something to help them? Daniel asked through their mental bond. I am easing their suffering where I can. I cannot cure the illness, but I can reduce pain and strengthen their bodies slightly. It may give them time until you discover treatment. Daniel felt gratitude wash through him. Thank you. He worked for hours without stopping. Blood samples, tissue cultures, diagnostic scans. Lisa brought him data from environmental testing. Henry arrived with a timeline of how the illness had spread through the colony. Carmen reported that the air filtration system was functioning properly, which meant the disease was not airborne, or the filters could not catch it. Daniel studied all the information, his medical training and 3 years of frontier experience coming together. The pattern of symptoms reminded him of something he had seen before on another station. The way it spread suggested transmission through direct contact. The victims all worked in the mining tunnels. Lisa, did you find anything unusual in the mineral samples from the tunnels? She pulled up data on her tablet. Actually, yes, there's a microorganism living in the rock. It's unlike anything in my database. Some kind of silicon-based life form that's been dormant for who knows how long. The mining equipment must have disturbed it. Daniel leaned closer to examine the data. These organisms are producing a toxin as part of their life cycle. When miners disturb the rock, they're exposed to the toxin. It's not a disease in the traditional sense. It's poisoning. Can we treat it? Peter Kim asked desperately. Daniel thought quickly. Standard toxin treatments would not work on something this alien. They needed something specific to counteract the silicon-based biochemistry. He pulled up his medical database and started cross-referencing compounds. Hours passed. Daniel tried dozens of different approaches in simulation. Most failed. A few showed promise but had too many side effects. He was running out of options when Nova's thoughts touched his mind. May I see what you are working on? Daniel shared his research through their bond. Nova studied the problem for several minutes. Then the keeper's eyes brightened. I have seen something similar before centuries ago. A different organism but with comparable biochemistry. There is a plant that grows on the third moon of a gas giant in the beta sector. The plant produces a compound that neutralizes silicon-based toxins. I can show you the molecular structure. Images flooded Daniel's mind. He saw the plant, saw how its chemistry worked, saw the exact compound Nova was describing. He quickly input the structure into his medical synthesizer. Lisa, can we produce this compound with our equipment? She examined the specifications. Yes, but it will take time. Maybe 6 hours to synthesize enough for all the patients. Then let's get started. While the synthesizer worked, Daniel continued providing supportive care to keep patients alive. Nova moved through the facility, using the Keeper's abilities to ease suffering and stabilize the worst cases. The colonists noticed and whispered among themselves about the strange alien creature that seemed to bring comfort. 6 hours later, Daniel held the first dose of the new treatment. He administered it to the sickest patient, a young woman named Claire, who had been unresponsive for days. Within minutes, her vital signs began to improve. Her fever dropped. Her breathing steadied. Relief washed through Daniel. It works. Start treating everyone showing symptoms. The next 12 hours were a blur. Daniel and his team administered treatment to every patient. Nova continued to provide comfort and support. Carmen worked with colony engineers to seal off the contaminated sections of the mining tunnels. Henry helped organize the colonists to care for each other. By the time Daniel finally stopped to rest, the crisis was over. Every patient was responding to treatment. No one else had died. The colony would survive. Peter Kim found Daniel sitting in a quiet corner, his head in his hands. The colony manager sat beside him. You saved us. All of us. We were giving up hope, and then you appeared like something out of a story. Daniel managed a tired smile. We just did our job. This is what we came out here to do. Still, the galaxy needs more people like you and your team. Peter paused. And your friend, the Keeper? People are talking about how it helped. They're not scared anymore. They're grateful. Daniel looked across the room to where Nova was resting. The Keeper's spots glowed softly in the dim light. Nova is special. I'm lucky to have this bond. The Horizon stayed at the colony for 2 more days, making sure all patients were stable and teaching the medical technicians how to produce more of the treatment in case any delayed symptoms appeared. When it was finally time to leave, the entire colony gathered to see them off. A little girl approached Daniel shyly. She held out a drawing she had made, a crude but recognizable picture of Nova surrounded by stars. Thank you for saving my mom. Daniel knelt to accept the drawing. His throat felt tight. You're very welcome. As the Horizon departed, Daniel stood on the bridge with his team. They all looked exhausted but satisfied. They had faced an impossible situation and won. They had saved lives. So, Jake said with a grin, where to next? Over the following weeks, they answered more calls for help. A station suffering from equipment failure that left them without oxygen recycling. Nova manipulated matter at the molecular level to repair the damaged systems. A ship stranded in a debris field with injured crew. Nova created a safe path through the dangerous area while Daniel provided emergency medical care. Each mission brought new challenges and new successes. Word spread through the frontier about the medical team that could appear anywhere, solve any problem, save anyone. People called them miracle workers. Some called them heroes. Daniel was uncomfortable with such labels. He was just a medic doing his job. But he could not deny that having Nova as a partner allowed them to help in ways no normal medical team could match. During a rest period at a supply station, Daniel sat with Nova in the Horizon's common area. Lisa was off exploring the station's xenobiology shops. The others were getting maintenance done on the ship. We've been doing this for 2 months now, Daniel said. 15 missions, hundreds of lives saved. Does it feel right to you? Is this what you hoped for when you decided to stay with me? Nova's thoughts were warm and content. This is better than I hoped. I am using my abilities as they were meant to be used. I am part of something meaningful, and I am not alone. The bond we share makes all of this possible. Daniel smiled. I still can't believe all this started because I heard breathing in a dark cargo bay. You made a choice in that moment. You could have walked away, but compassion moved you to stay. That single choice changed both our lives. Changed the lives of everyone we've helped too, Daniel said. It's strange to think about. If I had been too tired that night or taken a different route home or ignored what I heard, none of this would have happened, but you did not ignore it. That is who you are, Daniel Hayes. Someone who helps when help is needed regardless of cost or convenience. That